I don't even know what to say. Like, there is so much in here, so much texture, so much oomph that just brings everything to life. Very nervous, but also very much intrigued with where Fujimoto wants to go. There's a ton of directions, a ton of ideas, and you probably have a ton of questions yourself. Like, what did the Statue of Liberty mean? What did the children are their parents' property mean? What about the whole Pochita holding up the blood sign? Like, what is going on? I have answers and perhaps ideas, but more importantly, there's a lot of answers here. There's a lot of ideas, a lot of things that you can talk about. Honestly, each thing in here has multiple interpretations and like, oh, okay, that's normal, yada yada. But specifically for this chapter, it feels a lot more intentional. It's almost like Fujimoto wants you to wander around a lot of different ideas and not really settle on something concrete. Perhaps that's what he is going for, and perhaps that is why the chapter feels framed in that way. So let's do that. I want to start with probably the craziest statement in here. Children are their parents' property. This is spoken by Yoru, War, and it really raises an interesting perspective that she has that I actually don't think she believes herself inherently. Maybe partially, maybe for this situation, maybe because it's such a conflict of her own personal interest compared to what she didn't want to do previously. Quite literally, the chapter prior and the one before that, we seen her go through the motion of guilt. She did not want to use her children or her friends of war, whatever you want to call it, and yet it conflicted heavily with her personal agenda. She wants to be more feared. She wants to obliterate chainsawman. That conflict of interest, devouring her own friends or specifically her own children to complete her goal, is such a heavy thing for her character. So much so that it's woven within her design. Have you seen her arms lately? The design on her arms seems funeral driven. I'm sure a lot of people have talked about this. The design itself is perhaps of mourning, where you would dress in all black, shrouded in kind of the mesh fishnet aesthetic to mourn the loss of someone very important to you. Funeral attire. So she's gone from thinking about it to neglecting it to devouring that guilt to try to understand it, and now she has her children, Tank and Gun, but maybe not all of them. And it brings up another question that spirals from it. Is she providing freedom or is she shackling them to her? Children are their parents' property, no? This is an interesting statement for a lot of reasons, and I really like how vague it comes across. Almost monotone, almost expected from War, but perhaps it's just not that true, at least to the extent of what we've seen of War, the personality, the guilt that she has. A question. Her children, Tank and Gun, were locked away in facilities. They did not have freedom, and I want you to remember the word freedom specifically. War felt bad that she would take away her children's freedom by calling them back to her. She done this. They become a part of her. She dons funeral-like attire in that of mourning. So are her children caged once again, or are they free? Are they quote-unquote home? The more you think about that idea, the more convoluted it becomes. This isn't the only interpretation of that statement. Children are their parents' property. I actually think this doubles down into Denji and his childhood as well. On one hand, perhaps there is a good interpretation of Denji's mother, that she wasn't an evil person, that she wasn't a bad individual. Perhaps she was the only good that Denji ever had. That's inferred quite a lot, just with the small bits and pieces that Denji actually remembers about her. But he doesn't remember anything about his father, and that's because all of the bad, the trauma, the disgusting, horrible upbringing comes from him, and the action that Denji had to take to basically save himself. So in that volume, in that idea, Denji perhaps is property of his father and his mother in both a good and bad way. That doesn't mean he's shackled, though, and I think that should be clear. Denji is his own person, but he has been dealt a very horrible hand that has led his life down an even more horrible path. And even though he has struggled, he has garnered a lot of good from it. He has helped himself. He has found friends and loved ones that he appreciates. And while his world is still tossing and turning and being thrown all over the place, there's good people that he's willing to fight for. And that, I think, is what is important. However, there is one other perspective that's a little bit more theoretical. Children are their parents' property. What would that mean for Pochita? I brought up this idea a week or two ago in regards to Pochita being the child of death, and I really liked the idea. Funny enough, it actually built off the back of a previous idea I had about a year or two ago. Basically, I was thinking that Pochita perhaps could have been a tool of death, something that is a byproduct of death. And this pretty much followed the lines of all of the hybrids being controlled or being utilized as weapons or tools for the horsemen. So it makes sense that death, being a horseman and a primal fear as well, would also have their own tools, and Pochita would be the best example of that, no? Someone that can provide true death, that can erase people from existence, that can quite literally get rid of devils as well. So is Pochita just a child of death? Their property, running free, running rampant? And the more I thought about that, the more it got me into this idea that maybe Makima wanted to free Pochita. And that sounds really absurd, but the more you think about it, the more it kind of makes sense. Makima wanted to get rid of all of the horsemen and become one with Pochita. She only cared about Chainsawman, and I always wondered, like, why? Like, of course you have an obsession, you don't necessarily need a reasoning, but maybe there was just more to it. Maybe she felt bad, maybe she wanted to be with him in a way that was fulfilling, that he wasn't being utilized as a tool, that perhaps the feeling was mutual, not controlled, not manipulated, but just natural. Pochita perhaps has been used his entire life as a weapon of death, erasing things from existence under the hand of death itself. So Makima maybe offered a freedom for that, a freedom away from death itself, away from all of the horsemen that wanted to manipulate or abuse the power that he had, the property that he was a part of. There's a lot that you can go down, but I love this interpretation of war. I love the back and forth conversation that even Yoru has, bringing up Fami and wanting to turn Denji back and save him and do this and do that, and it's so wonderful, yet so horribly misaligned. Poor Asa knows nothing of this situation, still tiptoeing behind war, still trying to help Denji to whatever degree, but still following the horrible words of Fami. Nothing aligns properly, and that's the point. Now War, she tries her best to provoke Chainsawman to do enough damage, and she does a little bit, but Pochita's quick. Surprisingly, he doesn't attack. This is a big thing and a constant repeating thing that Chainsawman does. See, we don't know how Chainsawman operates. We don't know how Pochita thinks within this form. We don't know how the fusing of Denji's personality and Pochita's personality entangled to one being actually works. Naturally, we were led to believe that Pochita would attack anyone that basically provoked him, but perhaps it's a lot more animalistic. Maybe he just doesn't view war as a threat, but I find that difficult to believe. He disappears from the fight. He does not care what war has to offer, even though she's here monologuing and doing her best to show off and be everything that she wants to be. Honestly, good for her. Pochita is just in a completely different headspace. There's this very cute scene where he rocks up beside this lady who has a sign, blood drive, giving blood. She's dressed very similar to how Kobeni was at the diner, and I wonder if that's Pochita kind of trying to relive that memory a little bit. But also at the same time, the whole blood motif is kind of sad. So there's two kind of variations that you can get from this, and I think both work really well. If you want to count the Kobeni symbolism with the dress and how he kind of rocks up in front of her, technically there's three. The first being that give blood, donate blood, obviously power, something that Denji and even Pochita have very fond memories of, and maybe that's something that's sparking up right now, hence why he's doing it. The second is that because he's lost half of his body, he's actually asking people to give blood, so he's compassionate in a way. He's not forcing his healing abilities on anyone. He could have easily ate that person or anyone else he bypassed, drank their blood and healed the body. Instead, he's asking for it. It's a cute moment filled with a lot of differing ideas and possibilities, and honestly, whatever one you land on is just cute. Now, the last thing, the index finger, 400,000 people from the Pistol Association of America losing their index finger, Statue of Liberty, war mimicking the Statue of Liberty, it cracking and revealing potentially something. What does that mean? What is going on? Remember how I talked about freedom? So my understanding of this is that the Statue of Liberty is a representation of freedom, specifically getting rid of slavery, denouncing it, but also the friendship between the US and France, I believe. But the reason I think it cracks and why it's associated with the 400,000 people that lost their index finger is because for the Statue of Liberty to exist, the usage of guns and war and pillaging and quite literally war itself to acquire such type of quote-unquote freedom through war is kind of the perfect explanation. The Statue of Liberty kind of goes through this idea of representing freedom, but through the utilage of war, and guns being the biggest part of making that war possible, making it successful, making it dominating. So why do all of these people lose their finger? Well, perhaps it has something to do with war and what she is about to summon, which I think is the remaining part of the gun devil. Right at the end, two things spark my eye. Of course, the Statue of Liberty cracking, which symbolically, when your statue represents freedom, isn't looking all too good. Some monstrosity is about to form out of it, which is most likely the other half or part of the gun devil to create a hole. But also the finger of war, it's curled this time, almost like she's pulling a trigger. From what we've seen, every time someone uses the gun devil, they always point their finger, like a play gun of course. This time she's curling it, and I wonder if she's going to call upon maybe the full arsenal of guns, not just bang or the pistol singular shot variation of it, you know what I mean? There's a high chance that in the upcoming chapter you're about to see the full power of what gun actually represents, and that's fully automatic. That's stuff that can be fired quickly and rapidly without any reloading, and honestly that would be crazy to see. I just think it works well, and seeing it all abolish and crack and crumble on itself, because that is where they're hiding. They're deep and dark and nasty. The part of the gun devil is in the Statue of Liberty. That is kind of funny.